Hello everybody, welcome back to a new video. My name is Sarah and today we're going to do my mid-year freakout book tag. I wasn't really sure when to do this. I didn't know if I should do it at the beginning of June, the end of June. I kind of just decided to go towards the end of June. That way I could count maybe some of the books that I read in June. So I did get these questions from over at Brightness Katie Reads channel. She did a video, I will link it down below, so you can check out her answers. I think these are just the standard questions that usually circulate throughout YouTube and book blogs during this time. If they're not and I'm missing any, let me know, and I'll maybe answer in the comments or whatever. So far this year, it's June 22nd when I'm filming this, and I have read 33 books so far. I have a goal of 50 books this year, so I'm pretty confident that I will make that goal. And for many of these questions, I of course could not just pick one answer because I couldn't make up my mind. So for some of these, I do have several answers. I have it all written down in my little notebook. I'm actually organized and have notes for this. So the first question is the best book that you've read so far this year, and like I said, couldn't just pick one, so I have three. Here, and the first one is actually the first book that I actually read this year, and that is *To Sleep in a Sea of Stars* by Christopher Paolini. And the main reason why I really love this is because it reminded me how much I really love science fiction, particularly space operas, because this truly is a space opera novel. It is quite chunky. It's over 800 pages. I know a lot of people say that it's slower paced, particularly in the whole middle chunk. I do agree, but I ended up really liking it because of that. I liked how we kind of took our time with the characters and the science behind what was going on and such. And I liked the classic feel of the aliens in this book. And I just overall really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the theme of, fighting for humanity and such. And then the next two books that I read, I actually read right around the same time. I think I read them back to back, actually. And the first one is *Sorcery of Thorns* by Margaret Rogerson. I really loved this because of the classic fantasy fairy tale feel that it had, and I just really loved the characters and the gothic atmosphere, and I just really enjoyed it. And this book and this author will come up again in future questions. But yeah, I thought that it was beautifully written, very atmospheric, and it was just a really fun, adventurous read. And then the third book that I consider one of my favorites that I've read so far this year is *The Grace Year* by Kim Laguette. And I just really loved this for a similar reason that I loved *To Sleep in a Sea of Stars*. It was another that just really reminded me how much I love the genre that it's in. This is a dystopian thriller, and I hadn't read a dystopia book in quite a while, and this one just really renewed my love for the genre, and it just really surprised me of how much I enjoyed it. I just really loved the dark grittiness of it, and how it looked at kind of women versus women instead of the men versus women type of feminist conversation. It was just very interesting, and I just really enjoyed it a lot. So then the next question is the best sequel that you read so far this year, and I have two. This first one should come to no surprise for anybody if you've stuck around my channel a bit. You'll know that The Mask Falling came out this year by Samantha Shannon, and of course it is one of my favorite sequels that I read this year. This is the fourth book in the Bone Season series. There is projected to be 7 books in this series, and I loved this one. I think this one and the third one, The Sun Rising, kind of tie for my favorite in the series so far. I just really enjoyed how much Shannon branched out with the world building in this book. I feel like each one really just expands on the world, kind of like those nesting dolls, those Russian nesting dolls. If you've got the Bone Season, the first book is the baby one. Each one just gets progressively bigger, and that's how the world feels each time you read the next installment in this series. We also really spend a lot of time getting to really know Paige and Arcturus as characters. I mean, this is the 4th book, so we know them as characters, but I think we really explore kind of how they have experienced trauma and heal, and kind of their decision making, and just how deep their courage runs. And I just really love these characters, and I just love this series so much. And I refuse to believe that what happened at the end of this is actually like set in stone. Obviously what happened. It was pretty obvious and dramatic that there's no way it could have like not happened, but what was implied to have happened because of the big event, I don't believe it. I will need proof in the 5th book, because I refuse to acknowledge that it actually happened. But yeah, I absolutely loved it, and I love these characters so much, and this story, and it's just phenomenal, and Samantha Shannon is magical, and I love her so much. So read the Bone Season, so that you could read this book. So yeah, this is one of my favorite sequels. And then my other favorite sequel that I have read this year did not come out this year, but I did read it towards the very beginning of the year, and that is Restless, Slumber by KJ Sutton. I also read Deadly Dreams like a month later, but I do think that Restless Slumber is my favorite between the two. And so Restless Slumber is the 2nd book in the Fortuna Thorns series by KJ Sutton, Deadly Dreams being the 3rd. The 4th one, I think it's called Beautiful Nightmares, will come out later this year. I'm very excited to read that one, but I do think that I loved Restless Slumber the most out of like the 2 that I read this year, just because I think the pacing was perfect. There was a lot of action, a lot happening. We got kind of an expansion on the world, again another thing that I really loved, and we kind of took like a left turn from the main storyline in Restless Slumber, and I just really enjoyed how that allowed for the world to be expanded upon, and the different characters and such. And then the end was terribly shocking and distressing. It made me cry. There was like a series of like 2 big events. There was the event, and then a character's reaction, and then next move in response to this event. And those 2 events absolutely shattered my heart, and it was very hard to read. And I was shocked that the first event even happened to begin with. But then the reaction of this character and their decisions was heartbreaking, but also very courageous. And I just really thought that it was a bold decision by the author. And like I said, I did enjoy Deadly Dreams. However, I think that the whole first like 1/3 was a bit too slow. Both books definitely take the beginning of each book to kind of let the characters process what went on in the first book, because there are like there's like a lot that happens, and that is very traumatic for the characters, and so I do appreciate that both books took time for the characters to process. However, I think Restless Slumber was better paced in that processing than Deadly Dreams. I think that the way that Sutton handled the processing was very good. I think there's just kind of this lull where we were almost waiting for the next event to happen, because we were kind of past the processing point, if that makes sense. So that's kind of why I liked Restless Slumber a little bit better. I know that was really long-winded, but I just really enjoyed reading that, and I am very excited for Beautiful Nightmares to come out at the end of this year. With The Mask Falling, we do not have a set date for the 5th one. Samantha Shannon does take a little bit in between each book, and I know she is working on a totally different project right now, so I don't know when we'll get the 5th one. Hopefully it will be relatively soon. She did say that she's going to try to get out the Bone Season books at a faster rate than she has been, but you know, we do not rush perfection, because that's what these books are, and I will not rush her. as long as we get a finish, unlike with Game of Thrones, where I've given up hope of ever getting Winds of Winter, I know that Samantha Shannon will at least pull through for us. Okay, so that was a lot of blabbering on the one question. Next question is a new release that has already come out this year that you are excited to get to but you haven't yet. I do have one on my TBR for this month that I do plan on picking up next, so I'm not going to list that one, but the one that I don't have on my TBR that I am most excited about is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. This is supposed to be a horror novel. It's supposed to be involving like creepy body horror and kind of like witchy, occult, questionably supernatural stuff. We follow these three sisters that like 10 years ago they all randomly disappeared and then shortly after like reappeared back on like their street or whatever, but they don't remember what happened to them. But they have these like weird things that like their hair changes color and their eyes, and like they're just kind of strange and there's something eerie and off about them. And then like 10 years later one of them goes missing again, and so the other two have to kind of figure out where their one sister is and kind of how that links back to their mysterious disappearance during their childhood. And I've heard really good things about it. I haven't seen any negative comments or reviews on it yet, so I'm very, very excited about it, and I'm hoping to get to it within the next couple months. So then question number 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and mine would be Vesper by Margaret Rogerson. This is supposed to come out I think in September, and this is supposed to be a bit darker than her other two novels, and I think it's the start of a series. I'm not 100% sure on that. I've heard it's a standalone. I've also heard it's the first in a series. We'll see. I don't know a lot of the details, but that's kind of on purpose. For whatever reason, I just kind of don't want to go into this one knowing too much about it. I know that it's kind of this girl that's training in this like almost like a priesthood-esque thing, but then she's kind of gets, I think, bound to a spirit, or the spirit gets bound to her, and she has to kind of keep it in check. And then I think that there's something to do with the undead. Like I said, I don't know a lot of the details. I am just rather excited about it, but it is one that I do kind of want to go into more blind and not have any sort of like comparison or expectations compared to like her other two books that I really loved in my head going into it. I kind of just want to go into it just excited for another Margaret Rogerson book. 5th question is your biggest disappointment. So there's a couple books that I was fairly disappointed in this year. I think the most disappointing book was the one that I rated 1 star last month, and that is Constellation of Scars by Melissa Eskou Osley. I was really, really excited about the concept behind it. It was advertised as a horror novel of this girl who, when she turned 12, she started growing these pearls out of her back, and so her mom kind of held her hostage in order to harvest the pearls and sell them as a way to make money. And then one day the girl runs away and joins a band of traveling human oddities, and she eventually learns that the world is much more dangerous than what her mother ever tried to scare her into believing. And I was just very, very disappointed with how this all played out. I think the writing was very poor. It's kind of a boring story. The whole last third did not make any sense in terms of like what the whole first 2/3 of the book was about. The characters' reactions to things didn't make sense, and they all felt very one-dimensional. And I think that there was just one aspect of the book in particular that was very poorly utilized, poorly written, and used more as like a shock value than to aid in the writing the story at all. And so I don't think it was necessary, and I thought it was very distasteful. So I was rather disappointed in that one, and that was probably the most disappointing book of the year so far for me. And then question number 6 is your biggest surprise, and I think I would have to say Ray Bear by Jordan Afuego was my biggest surprise. Not that I went into this not like expecting a lot out of it, because I'd heard nothing but good things about this book, so I had expected to go into it liking it. I think what surprised me the most was how impressed I was with just the refreshing feel of this story. It felt like I didn't know YA fiction and YA fantasy in particular was missing a story like this until I read it. It just was very interesting, and I love the concept. The world building in particular felt very refreshing. Like, going into it, the general concept felt like something you would find in YA fantasy. Actually reading it, it felt different than what I was expecting, but in a good way. For our main character, who grows up in a very distant household, and she one day is sent to the capital of the city to compete to be one of the prince's kind of closest circle of advisors, and her mother tells her that when she wins the spot on this like advisory group and she wins over the love of the prince, she is supposed to kill him. And it took that concept in a direction that like wasn't typical of YA fantasy, and I just really loved the relationships and how we had several different types of relationships, several different types of friendship, and a romantic relationships, and it just explored like the concept of like friendship and family. I also really liked how it kind of expanded on just this single idea into something much bigger, and I was just really impressed with it, and I am very much looking forward to the sequel. I think it's called Redemptor, and it's coming out I think this fall, so I'm very excited to pick that up. So question 7 is favorite new author, and this can either be a debut author or a new to you author. And I said it earlier that Margaret Rogerson was gonna come back into this video, and here she is. She is one of my favorite new authors. I absolutely love her writing style. I love how atmospheric her 2 books are. She wrote Sorcery of Thorns, and then her other book is an Enchantment of Ravens. This was her first book, and this was the first one that I read by her, and I just really loved the, like I said, classic fairy tale feel of her stories, but they still feel like fresh and new, but also with some sort of tinge of nostalgia to them, if that makes sense. I think her writing style is beautiful, where A Sorcery of Thorns was kind of this gothic atmosphere, and Enchantment of Ravens was more of a autumnal fairy tale feel, much more of a lighter, whimsical, rich autumn feel to it. And I just really love her characters a lot, and I think that they have good banter. She writes banter really well, and they all just feel like characters that I just want to hug. And I really, really love her writing style, and I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of where her career takes her, and I kind of really am looking forward to following her as she publishes, hopefully, many more books. So 8 and 9, I'm kind of combining. 8 is your newest fictional crush, and then 9 is your newest favorite character, or just basically omitting the fictional crush one and not answering that one. I guess we could say that instead. But like I was talking about Margaret Rogerson, and I love all of her characters, and you know, I want to just hug them all. I really, really loved both Elizabeth and Nathaniel from Sorcery of Thorns, and I loved Rook from An Enchantment of Ravens. I did also like Isabel, but not nearly as much as Elizabeth. I just really loved how Nathaniel and Rook were kind of similar in their easy wit and banter. Rook was much more of a charmingly vain kind of character. He reminds me a lot of Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, and my battery is about to die. So we're gonna come back to this. Okay, my camera died, so I think we're good now. And I also have just really enjoyed Blue and her Raven Boys in the Raven Cycle series. I've only read the first 3. I plan to read the last one, The Raven King, next month. But I really enjoyed just their dynamic, their banter. I love Blue just as a character in general. I think we cover like a lot of different insecurities with her, and kind of how she's really grown close to this like small circle of friends. And the Raven Boys just have a wide variety of personalities. I think Ronan is my favorite just because he's a very difficult character. He's very angry and abrasive, but genuinely cares about his friends and has this fierce loyalty and protection for them. And I don't know, I just really like their whole character dynamic a lot. I think they're really fun to read about. And then I've also, I just adore Laszlo from the Strange to Dreamer duology. I'm currently reading Muse of Nightmares, which is the second book in the duology. I'm currently reading that right now, and I just adore him, and he just needs so many hugs. He's such a precious little cinnamon roll and so sweet, and I just think we need more male characters with that kind of personality, character type, because he's just so soft, so sweet, so precious, and I adore him. Then the 10th question is a book that made you cry this year. I actually surprisingly had a hard time picking out an answer for this. Most of the time I'm a crybaby when it comes to books, but there haven't been that many this year that made me cry. I know Sorcery of Thorns made me cry, but I was very emotional when I was reading that to begin with, so I think that kind of like aided in just burning out the tears. It wasn't gonna take much to make me cry at that point. I think the one that like genuinely, it was the book that made me cry, weirdly enough, was If We Were Villains by ML Rio. I don't know exactly why it made me cry. It was like a really complicated scene emotionally to begin with, and I think I just felt really bad for the characters, and it was just sad in like a weird way. Like the character deserved what was coming to them, but at the same time, like, you couldn't help but feel bad for them and feel bad for like another of the characters as well. And yeah, I kind of surprised myself when I started crying while reading it, but yeah, it was weirdly sad. And then question 11 is the opposite, books that made you happy. And I think the one that made me the happiest while reading it so far this year is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I know I've mentioned her books and her just like several times throughout this whole video, but I just really enjoyed this book. It just kind of became like this comfort read for me. It's just very whimsical and lighthearted, and just a very sweet story, and it just made me really happy and warm and fuzzy inside, and I just really loved it. And then question 12 is the most beautiful book that you have acquired so far this year, and I think mine is the Owl Crate edition of The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan Hay. Now normally this color scheme in the original edition is green and blue, but the Owl Crate edition is pink and purple. The spine is the same, and there's the back. The end papers are absolutely gorgeous as well. I think these end papers are also in the original cover, or like the original edition. And then we've got kind of a little detailing on the front too. But I just really adore this art style and this artwork, and I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm actually, this is one of the books that I am most anticipating reading, but I didn't list it because I plan to read it next. It is on my June TBR, and I should get to it before the end of the month. And then question 13 is what are some books that you need to get to before the end of the year? And my answer is my entire TBR cart. Got these guys down below. This is The Raven King. These guys here. The rest of the Ember Quartet. And then swing this around. We've got these guys. And then down here, pull these guys out a little bit. Can you see these? Those. And then a couple more. That guy. Yeah. So we've got this whole cart. Of course, I'm not going to get to all of these. There's Toasty. Before the end of the year, but I'm going to get to as many as possible. Yes, it is quite full. Although we do still have some room. But yeah, these guys. And then I also have a handful on my Kindle. I know I have Jade City, The Wolf of Oren Yarrow, A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, a couple of arcs. Yeah, if you saw any on my cart, or if there are any that I listed on my Kindle that you think I should prioritize to get to this year, let me know down in the comments. And then question 14 are my favorite book community members. I love anybody who watches my videos and comments and everything. Some of my favorite people to watch, I like Frolic Through Fiction a lot. I know I've mentioned her a couple of times. Short Skirts and Sarcasm. We did a buddy read earlier this month. I like Spoopy Hall, Brandon's Katie Reads, who I've mentioned that I got the questions off of her channel from. Meg with Books, Indecisive Readers, Peruse Projects, she's pretty big. And there's several others that I do like to watch. I will list them all down below with links to their channels. I highly recommend checking them out if you're looking for more bookish content and people to watch that love to talk about books on YouTube. But those are the 14 questions for the mid-year freakout book tag. I will list these all down in the description down below in case you need them for easy access to make your own videos or your own book blog content. Definitely share below in the comments if you have already made your book tag videos or posts. I love to check them out. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you consider sticking around and subscribing. As always, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!